بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So we're continuing from the Believer's Handbook for Seeking Knowledge, and today inshallah we're going to start phase 8. Start and inshallah finish phase 8. So a short one. Probably should have gone into more detail in it, but I mean this is a phase that the majority of the people they won't reach anyway. So Allah musta'an. And by the time that you get to this phase, and if you take the basics of what you see here, then it's going to lead you to more than what's here, obviously. I mean, but what's here is just like the basics of what you need to get you started. So this phase is dealing with the poetry and going into Arabic poetry. I did not deal with writing poetry. I dealt with how to actually learn, like just reading poetry, understanding it, and the explanations and just that type of stuff. So inshallah, let's get started. So I said in this phase you want to start memorizing and reading Arabic poetry. I mean, you should have already started at least memorizing some poetry from before. I mean, obviously if you've already gotten to this phase, you should have already had some poetry memorized. I mean, because the whole point of you read poetry, you see things that you like and you say, oh, that's a cool poem, I'm going to memorize that. You should have already been doing that. But like right now, it's just like maybe, in this phase, you're going to start to take it a little bit more serious. So I said your goal here is to increase your understanding of the Arabic language and your vocabulary. This will assist you a lot when you read through tafsir and you read read books of the scholars of the past. Moreover, before you go to the final level of Nahu, you need to have an understanding of Arabic poetry first. Yeah, because the higher levels of Nahu is going to be going through a lot of abiyat al-shi'riyas, so a lot of the shawahid for a lot of the rules of Nahu, they're going to be poetry. So you have to have at least a foundational knowledge and have a good background of Nahu, of poetry before you go into those higher levels of Nahu. If you don't have any experience reading poetry, then that's gonna really, really be a difficult thing. If you read through the Sharh of any of the books of Ibn Hisham, whether you're reading the Sharh of Qatar al-Nada, Shadur al-Dahab, whether you're reading through Awdah al-Masalik, or whether you're reading through Mughni Labib, or you're reading from the books of Muhammad ibn Malik al-Imam, you're reading through like Sharh ibn Aqil, or his other, he's got multiple. I mean, Ibn Aqil is the Sharh of his Alfiyah. It's not, he didn't actually write it, but he wrote a book. It's called Al-Kafiyat al-Shafiyat, which is the actual Sharh of the original poem of Alfiyat ibn Malik, because the original poem was more than 2,500 lines. So when you read the explanation of Alfiyat li Muhammad ibn Malik, you're going to see a lot of poetry. So you have to have this type of background to before you go into to that level of Nahu. So now I said the best thing to start with is the poetry of Jahiliyyah. A lot of people would differ about that. Because some of the people are going to say, well, the Jahiliyyah poetry is not going to be the easy. The Jahili poetry is not going to be the easy poetry. Just put it up over there. I mean, obviously, like the more modern poetry would be like easier to understand. And when I'm saying modern, I don't mean modern like like this year or last year. I mean like Abu Firas al-Mutanabbi, like 600, 700 years ago. That's what I would consider. That's as modern as I would get. Abu Tamam, Abu Firas, Mutanabbi, like around that time period. Abu Tamam's a little bit earlier, but yeah, like around that time period, that's about as modern as I would go. But the Jahili poetry is the only poetry that you could actually use as evidence in the Arabic language. Al-Mutanabbi can't use that as evidence because he's too late. Anything that's and they differ regarding this issue of when the cutoff point is. Some of the people say it's around 25 Hijri. Some of the people say a little bit later. But it's basically once the Futuhat started, like the open, when Islam started to spread, and it opened, the Muslims opened up Sham and opened up, and then those different areas, and all the different non-Arabs started coming into Islam. Then at that point, khalas, nothing from that period on is considered. No, No. It's not Jahiliyyah. It's not considered. You can't use it as evidence. So, for example, like the time of Bukhari, and you can't use, like, for example, like poetry in the time of Bukhari as evidence in the Arabic language, because Bukhari is not, he's a non-Arab. So the non-Arabs, and it's not saying that, because at this point there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of, that came into the Arabic language, not just through the grammar, but also through word usage. So you can't use any of that as evidence. So the cutoff point is like around 25 to 50 Hijri, with a lot of difference of opinion. After that, khalas. You can use it, but you can't use it as evidence. You can't say that this is the way that the Arabs spoke, unless it's from that time period. So utilizing your time memorizing the poetry from Jahiliyyah has more benefit because it's evidence. It's evidence, just like we look at like the Quran and the Sunnah as evidence and all the issues of deen. But when we look at the issues of the Arabic language, you have the Quran, the Sunnah, they have ikhtilaf as far as using the hadith of the Prophet as evidence in the Arabic language. Some of the ulama, they don't use it because of the what? For example, like Imam al-Bukhari would narrate the hadith from what? Through meaning. So if he narrated the hadith with meaning, which means he kept the meaning, but he used his own words, they can't use it as they wouldn't use it as evidence because of Bukhari is at a time period where it's not used as evidence. But if it's known that these are the words of the Prophet ﷺ, it was memorized the way that he said it, then khalas, there's no issue. I'm not on the opinion of not using the hadith. The hadith is evidence, regardless of what they have ikhtilaf in. But the Quran obviously is the number one evidence, and the poetry from Jahiliyyah, that's the third evidence. So we have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, we have the poetry from Jahiliyyah, and obviously the poetry from Jahiliyyah is going to be more what? It's going to be more vast because it's dealing with all aspects of life. Whereas the Sunnah, when we go through the Sunnah, it's going to be dealing with aspects of life. It's like how to practice the deen properly, how to be, how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly. But the Jahiliyyah, they're dealing with, their life, all throughout their lives, all the aspects of their life. So you're going to get like more vocabulary. And plus, because they tried to speak in a way where they use more words, whereas the Prophet ﷺ spoke in a way where everybody could understand him. So, he wasn't trying to make his speech difficult for the people. He's trying to make it what? And that's a hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. What's the hadith, Saif? I literally just read the hadith right before they came, right in front of you. Kana kalam Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kalaman what? Fasla. Yafhamuhu kull man sami'. So his kalam was kalam faslan, like he didn't speak in like metaphors and figurative speech. He spoke in a very, very detailed way, straight to the point, where everybody who listened to him can understand exactly what he meant. He did not speak in this type of, metaphor. So there's no metaphors in the Quran. There's no metaphors in the Sunnah. Everything is what? It's direct. But when you go into poetry, you're going to see more figurative speech, more metaphors, more, similes and all this type of stuff. And then also you're going to see more vocabulary. So most of the vocabulary that you see in the dictionaries is taken out of the poetry. All you got to do is just look at Lisan al-Arab and you'll see, because he uses the poetry as evidence for the words in the Arabic language. All right. So I said the best thing to start with is the poetry of Jahiliyyah. And the best poetry to start with are the mu'allaqat, the hung poems. They say these were the best poems in Jahiliyyah, and they would write the poem out in gold ink and hang it on the Kaaba. And that is how these poems received their name. There are 7 that are authentic, and there are 3 more that are questionable. The questionable ones are actually poems from Jahiliyyah, but it is questionable if they were hung on the Kaaba. So it's not an issue of those poems being, like you got like a Nabigha, he's got a Mu'allaqa, but again, it's one of the 10. It's not one of the 7. It's not a question of whether or not Nabigha wrote the poem. He wrote the poem, but it's a question of what? Whether or not it's from the Mu'allaqat. So the poem is still evidence. The questionable ones are actual poems from Jahiliyyah, but it is questionable if they were hung on the Kaaba. Read and try to memorize all 10 of them. With this phase, you're going to need access to a good number of books. I would say the following list would be sufficient. you start with the 4 books. Was it 3 or 4? I think it was 4. The 4 books mentioned by Ibn Khaldun. So the 4 books mentioned by Ibn Khaldun was Al-Kamil lil-Mubarrad. He mentioned Adab al-Katib, the Ibn Qutaybah. He mentioned Al-Bayan wa Tabyin lil-Jahidh. And he mentioned Al-Amali lil-Qali. These 4 books, they are like the foundation of the Arabic poetry, you know. And I mentioned them in this, so let me read exactly here what I said. So I said Al-Kamil lil-Mubarrad, very beneficial book, and generally it's like in 2 or 3 volumes, and he brings all the adab of the Arabs from that time period. And Al-Mubarrad is an imam. He's an imam in the Arabic language. Al-Fiqh al-Lugha li-Tha'labi. Fiqh al-Lugha is an excellent book. It's one of those books that and when I was in Damaj, I used to sit up all night long just drinking tea and reading this book by a gas lantern. I'd have this gas, and it wasn't that I planned to stay up all night, but the book was so good that next thing you know, it was like, you know, me and this brother used to joke and say, well, we've reached the point of no return. The point of no return is like you hit about 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock, it's like it's pointless to go to sleep. We didn't have alarm clocks. You had to just go ahead and just, you know, rough it out until Fajr and then go to sleep later. You're going to miss breakfast that day, but, you know, so be it. The book was worth it. Fiqh al-Lugha is an excellent book. He goes over all the different meanings of the words, and he goes over like all the names for the body parts, whether it's an animal, what type of animals. He goes over the different types of walking, like the walking for, like, for example, like a pregnant woman. What would you call it in the Arabic language? What if it's a pregnant cow? You know, so I mean, it's so detailed, and it's just so interesting. You sit there and you'll just be looking up words and reading through that book like, subhanAllah, for hours and not even get tired. Adab al-Katib, I have the book Ibn Qutaybah, but I haven't really read in it a lot, so I can't really comment on it so much. But it's similar in nature. For what I have read from it, it has a lot of aspects of fiqh al-lugha in it, but he also goes through like the different awzan, because he's specifying like these are the exact meters that the words of the Arabic follow, because this is how you know that the word's Arabic, because it follows a certain pattern, a certain meter, and you'll know that this word is not Arabic because what? It doesn't fall under any of those patterns. And Ibn Qutaybah does a good job at listing those. Like I said, I need to sit down and read that book in its entirety. I haven't, and I really, really want to, inshallah. Just do it soon. It's a small book. It's not even that big. Let me see. Go get it safe. So yeah, after that, Al-Bayan wa Tabyin lil-Jahidh. Jahidh also from the Imams of the Lugha. Al-Bayan wa Tabyin is he brings like more like Al-Jahidh is his book is pretty interesting. I mean, he'll bring poetry, but he'll also bring like actual speeches that were memorized from that time period. You know, where people actually spoke. You know, where they got up and gave talks, and the people memorized the talks and they wrote it down. And he'll actually bring that. You get it. It's like most of the times it's printed in 2 volumes. It's over there too, to the right of. That's it. So all these books that are mentioned here, they're over there, except for Majma' al-Amthal and Maqamat. I think, did I get Maqamat? I don't know. I gotta check. All right. So Al-Amali lil-Qali, excellent book. Excellent book. It's Al-Amali lil-Qali is basically on the same level of like Al-Kamil al-Mubarrad. A lot less popular. Al-Kamil is a lot more popular because Al-Mubarrad, like I said, he's an imam. You know, he's like a huge imam in the language. Al-Amali lil-Qali is at that level. Al-Amali is probably more readable. Al-Mubarrad is kind of like all over the place. It's just like, oh yeah, I forgot to put this in there, and then he'll just put it there, you know. So it's not really organized, but it's just all over the place. Whereas Al-Amali, it's more organized. It's more you know, and it's just easier to read, and he does more explanation. The Sharh Shu'ara al-Sittati, the Doctora this is the sharh of the Shu'ara al-Sitta. The Shu'ara al-Sitta is a diwan of six of the poets from Al-Jahiliyyah, from six of the seven of the Mu'allaqats. And what the person did is a person from Andalus. He compiled all the poetry that he had. So he took like for example, like the Mu'allaqa of Imru Qais, and then he brought other poetry from Imru Qais. Then he takes the Mu'allaqa of Tarafa, then he brings other poetry from Tarafa. Then, so he did this with all of the six of the seven of the Mu'allaqas. And it's a very beautiful book. This Duktura Kamila Al-Kawari, she explained it in 5 volumes. It's right there, that colorful book on the shelf. The one with all the multiple colors on it. So that's a very good explanation. And inshallah, me and Saif are going to start reading through this one day, right? We have to finish up Al-Qawaid Al-Mufla, and inshallah, then we're going to start reading that together. So, and no, Hamid, you're not invited. All right, Al-Muzhir Al-Suyuti, also a very excellent book. Excellent book. Not very popular, not very well known. I was like, this is one of the books that I found. I used to go to the bookstores in Sana'a, and I would just go and I would get on my hands and knees and get on the bottom shelves and try to find things that people didn't know about. And this is one of the books that I found. And when I took,
the hidden gems.
Yeah, because people don't buy them, so as they're not buying them, they move them down to the bottom shelf. So you find those old books. The old books that have just been sitting there for years and nobody buys them. So I found this book in one bookshop. And that was it. I took it home and started reading through it. I'm like, why was this book even still available in the bookshop? Because people don't know it. People didn't know about it. So Al-Muzhir is a very, very good book. Very good book. It goes over just every aspect of the Arabic language. It's like a sort of like Adab al-Katib on steroids. Like if Adab al-Katib took like, growth hormone and steroids and creatine, that would be Al-Muzhir. Because that's what Suyuti did. Suyuti didn't write books per se. Like he didn't, obviously he wrote, but what he did was he was a bahith. He was a researcher. And he had access to so many different books that people of his time didn't have access to, because look at it, they're at a time when people were still, you had libraries of handwritten books. These were libraries. They didn't have printed books. So he had access to books where nobody had access to. So he was able to compile. And I think I mentioned this in one lesson before, that Suyuti used to fill up about 11 notebooks every single day. And he used to get so excited whenever he found new information. He's Egyptian, right? So, just keep that in mind. He's Egyptian. So whenever he would find new information, he would literally get up and start dancing in the mektaba. He would dance, out of celebration that he found this information in the books, So Allah musta'an. Yeah. But he was a strong researcher. And that's why a lot of books were preserved through Suyuti's writings. Because Suyuti actually took and literally, basically he said, I'm not going to paraphrase. This is what the book said. He'll literally copy it word for word into his book. And then that book got lost. The manuscript of the book got lost, and it was actually preserved there's many cases of Suyuti, books that are lost, but they're actually preserved in his writings. Because we don't have access to those books anymore. But the only way we have access to them is through his research. Yeah. So, and that's why you see, along with time, we don't know the books that they had access to. You see, if you read through a lot of different books that are ulama from before, you see them quoting from books. They're not available to us now. So we don't, all we got, we have to take whatever we have, and we do what we can do with it. But subhanAllah, so many books also got lost, especially in Iraq. The whole library was dumped in the Euphrates. So imagine that. And to the whole point that the Euphrates, the color changed because of the ink of all the books that got thrown in there. So Allah musta'an. So after that, I said Majma' al-Amthal. You got,
اسمه دكتور؟
I can't remember.
بس الآداب المكتبة كان يحتوي على العلم الديني والعلم
Everything. Everything. So you got Majma' al-Amthal and you also got Jamhirat al-Amthal. Zamakhshari also has one. But Zamakhshari's is not, I have it. And it's a decent book. I wouldn't advise anybody to buy it. It's not like a book. Majma' al-Amthal actually came out after Zamakhshari wrote his book. And Zamakhshari actually was angry. not angry, but he was just like, this is the way it's supposed to be done. You know, like he saw like, you know, his book was like nothing compared to Majma' al-Amthal. So Majma' al-Amthal is another book. It's in 2 volumes. It brings all the Amthal of Jahiliyyah. The Amthal are like, you know, like sayings from Jahiliyyah. Like, you know, because they had sayings. And these sayings, they have stories behind them. So what they do, like, for example, like you had the story of this one, the funniest story that I used to always tell the students, like, you know, in Yemen. It was like there's one story about ذكرني فوقي and فقر حمار أهلي. You know, that your mouth reminded me that I lost my family's donkey. You know, and what's the story behind this is because a man, he went to sleep and he was traveling, fell asleep, and when he woke up, the family's donkey, he had his family's donkey with him, and it walked off while he was sleeping. So he went, he's like, where's my donkey? I'm like, my family's donkey, I lost my family's donkey. So he went to go look for it. When he's looking for it, he saw this woman, she was pulling water out of a well, and she was covered up. She had like this, like, you know, so he was trying to talk to her to get her to like uncover her face. So it's like, let me see what you got, you know? So he finally convinced her to show him her face. And when he saw her mouth, he said this, your mouth reminded me that I lost my family's donkey. I gotta go, you know? So, you know, so, I mean, you get these stories like this in Yahi, you could read that book for days. You could read it, like, you know, seriously. That book will do more for you staying up than probably like a crackhead smoking crack. Seriously, like you will not, like seriously, you would just be drinking tea and reading this book and you can't put it down. You can't put it down. It's just one of those books. If I had it right now, I'd probably sit up like late at night. And the only reason why I don't have it is because it's one of those books. Every time that it was available and for sale, I just didn't have the money to buy it. I didn't have the money to buy it. And then it sold out when I had the money, and I was like, well, khalas. So I ended up trying to get it, so I bought Zamakhshari's. And when I bought Zamakhshari's, I'm like, nah, this is not it. This is not it. It's good, but it's not it. Like Zamakhshari, he had one good book in the lugha and the language, and that's Asas al-Balagha. That's a book, that's probably the only book that you will ever hear me say, get this from Zamakhshari. He has that book, Asas al-Balagha, which is excellent. It's a dictionary. It's basically a dictionary, but he brings like all the words and how they're used in the poetry. It's an excellent book. Excellent. Another book that I found on the bottom shelves of the bookstores. Because they had a big bookstore in Sana'a. It's called Khalid bin Walid. So Khalid bin Walid, they sell everything. They sell deen books. They sell everything. But it's all Arabic. They don't sell. They might have like a little small section of English books for like the students that study English literature. Like you'll find like Charles Dickens and Shakespeare and stuff like that. But you're not gonna find like any interesting books like like Stephen King or something like that. But it's just all Arabic. So, but because they sell every type of book, they sell every type of book of everybody. So they're gonna sell like books of Ahl Sunnah, books of Sufis, books of Shia, everything. So when you go into the Lugha section, it's just, it's huge. And you just, I used to pull the books to see what was hiding behind the books, get on the bottom shelf, get my knees dirty, Like I'd be just looking behind the books and I find all these types of books. I found so many gems in there. One time I found the tafsir of Fairuz Abadi, Sahib al-Qamus al-Muhit. It's a tafsir of Tafsir Ibn Abbas, where he only narrated tafsir from Ibn Abbas. And it's probably the most unauthentic book known to man, but it's so rare. It was so rare. Like most of the narrations that he brought from Ibn Abbas are weak, but it's just Fairuz Abadi. I said, I gotta get it. I gotta get it. I bought 2 copies, one for me, one for Abu Zainab. So every time that I found these books, I would buy one copy for Abu Zainab, which is like his uncle in Yemen. You know, he's a student of knowledge from Damascus. He studied back in the days of Sheikh Mubin Rahimullah. So, yeah, man, Majma' al-Amthal, you gotta get it. You gotta get it. Fiqh al-Lugha, Majma' al-Amthal, those books like that, Al-Muzhir, and all, like basically just get every book that I mentioned here. Maqamat al-Hariri will make you want to commit suicide, basically. Like when you read Maqamat al-Hariri, you're going to realize that you do not know the Arabic language. You don't know Arabic. Like you don't know Arabic. I don't care what level that you think you're at. When you read the Maqamat, you're like you just feel like you just started studying Arabic yesterday. It's a very, you need to get it with an explanation. There's actually one Shanqiti guy that's actually teaching. He's going through the Maqamat al-Hariri, but I haven't listened to his lessons. So I haven't listened to I've listened to some of them, not a lot of them, but Maqamat al-Hariri will have you rethinking your whole entire existence. Oh, it's a good book, though. It's very beneficial, but you have to have really, in this day and age, you're going to have somebody. You have to, not to teach it, but you read it with him, and he kind of like guides you through the book, because otherwise you're just going to be like, what's going on? Is this Persian? This has got to be Persian. This is not, so along with time. All right, so then I said, in addition to this list, you're going to need every explanation you can get of any poetry from Jahiliyyah. I mean, you should just get any. I mean, if you can get the explanation of the Diwan al-Mutanabbi, it's in 2 volumes, get it. If you, whatever explanation of any of the poetry that you can find, they have like explanations of Lamiyat al-Arab, excellent. Suyuti has an explanation, other ulama have it. The Zamakhshari has an explanation. Also Lamiyat al-Ajam, which is another poem that's known, you get the explanations of that. And yes, man, you just gotta read. You gotta read, man. And so I said you need all the explanations of the 7 or 10 hung poems. You need any explanations that you can get for other poems, such as the explanations of Lamiyat al-Arab by Shanfara. It is an excellent poem, but you're going to need every explanation you can find to understand it. The book I mentioned in the list by Kamila al-Khawari is an excellent book. It is 5 volumes, and she explains every poem in the compilation of Al-A'lam Shantamari. I always mess up on this man's name. Shantamari. Yeah. It's from Andalus. He's the one that wrote the Diwan al-Sittati al-Jahidi. All right, this compilation is the book that was required for memorization in Mauritania back in the days, and it still is. This sister explained everything and did a very good job of explaining too. You might want to get this book first because it will be the easiest. All the other books on the list are going to make you hate your life on some days. On other days, in fact, most days, you will begin to truly enjoy the Arabic language. When you it can actually become dangerous because you forget that we're studying the Arabic language for Islam. You start to forget it. That is, you enjoy it too much when you forget. Like, hold on, man, I should be reading hadith or something. It's like you start to get so caught up in just reading poetry and and it can take you out. So when you were studying Nahu, everything was so technical. When you get into poetry, you can relax and enjoy your reading. That is exactly what you should do in the phase in this phase is enjoy your reading. I mean, you could even just take the Diwan. Like the first one during that COVID time, I took the Diwan of Abu Firas al-Hamdani and just read it. I said, I'm just going to sit down and read it. I'm not going to go through the explanation. I'm just going to read the whole. Yeah, it's like reading a history lesson. Because, I mean, his cousin was Saifullah, and they had the whole, and Abu Firas was captured in battle by the Romans and placed in a Roman jail. So he was actually wrote a lot of his poetry from the Roman jail. And then after that, his cousin had been removed from power and taken out and done away with. So he got released from the Roman jail. He's trying to come back and reclaim his cousin's Adola, and he got killed doing it. So Mutanabbi, which is also another famous poet, was the poet for Saif-ud-Dawla. He was the actual poet in the court because Abu Firas was locked up, and he was a fighter, so he went out and fought. So Abu Firas, just read through his poetry, it was just, when I got done with it, I was like sad. I was like, I wish he had written more, because you're like in a whole, it's like almost like time traveling. You're there, because that poetry, it puts you there and what's happening. You go read like Abu Tamam. Like Abu Tamam has the poem that he wrote when they went and fought against the Romans. And he, at the beginning of the poem, you can find it online. It's like, in the Sayfu Astaqu min Sayfu Astaqu and Ba'in min al-Kutubi fihi look it up, Sayf. Oh, you can't look it up. Look it up. Sayfu Astaqu and Ba'in min al-Kutubi. This is one of the most famous poems of Abu Tamam. And Sayfu Asdaqu and Ba'in min al-Kutubi. Asdaqu min al-Sidq. Read the first line. Just that first line is just like, that's the most gangster poetry ever. Like
في حده
في حده الحد بين الجد واللعب. So he said, Al-Sayfu Astaqu and Ba'in min al-Kutubi. He said that the sword is more truthful in speech than the books. Fi haddihi, and it's the sharpness of its blade. Al-had, the boundaries between, the boundaries are set on the blades of the sword between what's, joking and being serious. So when you pick up the sword, it's time to be serious. He wrote this poem when they went to war with the Romans over a woman. So the woman, as she had yelled out to Mu'tasim, said, "Ya waylak ya Mu'tasim," and she did this while the Romans captured her. And she said, "Ya waylak ya Mu'tasim," or something of that nature. You can find the story online, right? And then that got back to Mu'tasim, and he said, "Get the army ready." She called on me to help her, and they went to war with the Romans over that woman. And then he wrote the poem to basically get the soldiers hyped up to go fight against the Romans. He trashed them, akhi. That poem is probably like about 80 something lines or a little bit more. He bashed the Romans, akhi.
Is this a Priya song?
No.
This is
This is like, this is.
He's Muslim?
Yeah, they're Muslim. That's Mu'tasim.
So Muslim men went to war for women?
They went to war with the Romans and bashed the Romans over a female because they captured her.
But I thought Muslims, they oppress women.
Yeah. Oh, that's the Shia. The Rafidis oppress women, yeah. Because all those stories that ever came out about women getting beat there are from the Rafidis. They even made a movie about it back in the 80s, so.
You see what I'm trying to say? Like the Kuffar, they always
The Kuffar just, they make stuff up because they're stupid.
Yeah.
They got nothing better to do, because, they got their religion is all made up. It's, like I always say, like their religion is Cartoon Network, so.
Yeah.
So along with time.
Cartoon Network.
Yeah, it's like they just make it up like every day, like, okay, what's new,
Yeah.
What did Jesus say today, It's like, along with time.
It's not even used. What did the Kardashians
Jesus Kardashian.
Yeah.
And even when you tell them, like, dude, Jesus never existed, they're like, how can you say that? It's like, yeah, I've never known a person in Sham named Jesus. I've never seen, never, like, nobody with that name ever existed in that area, Jesus, I didn't see Jesus.
I see Asa.
Exactly. All right, but then, all right, so back to this before we get too sidetracked, which we already did. All right. I said there are so many different themes in Arabic poetry, and the more you read, the more you will see. One of the best books that really kind of like showed you the different themes. What was the name of that book? I have to go back and let me see if. Never mind. I listed it here. It's right here. All right, there are so many different themes in Arabic poetry, and the more you read, the more you will see. A good book to pick up for the themes is a book written by Ahmed al-Hashimi called Jawahir al-Adab. Very good book. Very good book. All these poems, like, the Abu Tamam, all these famous poems, you'll find them. He compiled them in this book, but he compiled them based on the themes. Like, so if it was like a poem about bragging about tribal affiliations or tribal bragging, he'll bring those poems that did that. If it was like poems that kind of like dealt with more like wisdom, he brought those poems. Then if it was like warfare, then he brought those poems. If it was about women, then he brought those poems. So he brought every poem based on the theme of the poem. Very interesting book. Very, very good book. It's another one of those books. Whenever it's available, you just gotta snatch it up. Snatch it. All right. This is an excellent book, and the book is not restricted to the Jahili poetry because he's Egyptian. The guy that wrote it, he's around the time of Muhammad Muhyiddin, which is Muhammad Muhyiddin was the one who wrote Tuhfat al-Saniyya, and he also wrote, he did a lot of the tahqiqat of Qatr al-Nada and Awdah al-Masalik, where he went and Ibn Aqil also was done by Muhammad Muhyiddin, where what he did is he took Ibn Aqil and he did the i'rab and the explanation of all the abiyat al-shi'riyah. So he did like a lot of khidmah. So also Ahmed al-Hashimi was around that time, and they just what they did in Egypt as far as like reviving the Arabic language. It's just mashallah, they did a very good job putting those books together. So you'll see like al-Hashimi, he'll bring like modern day Egyptian poets, but he's also going to bring all the stuff from before. He's just like throws it all in together. All right, so I said. This is an excellent book, and the book is not restricted to Jahili poetry. He brings poetry from all the different eras throughout Islamic history. He also separates the poems based on the theme of the poem. Therefore, he would group all the lovey-dovey poems together, all the war poems together, all the wisdom-filled poems together, all the bragging and boasting poems together, etc. A very good book to have for this phase. As far as memorization in this phase, you should memorize whatever poems you love the most. There are going to be poems that hit you when you read them, and those are the poems that you should memorize. If you can memorize all 7 or 10 of the hung poems, that is ideal, but really you should memorize what you like. My favorite poem then and now is Lamiyat al-Ajam by At-Tughra'i. The first 10 times I read the poem, I cried. Not just me. I cried, and my wife was like, what's wrong with you? Why? I said, read this poem. She read the poem and she cried. I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? And then it became our favorite, just a favorite poem. I never memorized the poem because of that. Because I said if I memorize it, I'm not going to have the same feeling.
Crying too much.
No, because when you memorize it, I have to read it so much that it doesn't have the meaning anymore. So I really, really like something, I won't memorize it. I won't memorize it. All right, so then I said, need I say more? All right, I said, all right, 10 times I read the poem, I cried. Need I say more? Those are the poems that you want to memorize. Enjoy yourself in this phase. As you read through the different poems, you're going to get so much history. The first diwan of poetry I read was Abu Firas al-Hamdani. He wrote most of his poetry while he was held captive in a Roman prison because he was captured during the war. His cousin was Saif ad-Dawla. His poetry is full of the events that were happening during those days. I was reading poetry, but I also felt like I was reading history. I felt like I was there. Like, I literally felt like I was there. I used to go outside, and this was in Sardinia, and I would go outside and I forget what time period I'm in. I'm like, wow, there's cars. Where did these things come from? Because I would be so entranced with that poetry. I was like there, on horseback, riding next to him, going into battle. It was like the way that he wrote his poetry is so beautiful, so beautiful. And he's got he's got my favorite poem before Lamiyat al-Ajam. I didn't read Lamiyat al-Ajam until like 2010. But Abu Firas, I knew about him from my first days in Damaj. He had a poem, it's called Lamiyat, and they call it Lamiyat. But, it's the poem by Abu Firas. I knew that from way, way, way back in Damaj. He starts off the poem, Amma li jamilin inda kunna matabu, wa la li musiin inda kunna mathawabu. Laqad adallam, huh? What? Huh? Look it up. Look it up. Look it up on your phone. أما لجميل عندكن ثواب ولا لمسيء عندكن متاب لقد ضل من تحوي هواه خريدة وقد ضل من تقضي عليه كآب ولكنني I'm doing too much for you.
Yes.
أما لجميل
أما لجميل
جميل عندكن ثواب ولا لمسيء عندكن متاب. He's basically bashing women right here. And, you know, he's talking about how like stupid women can be. She said, "Oh, if he's a handsome man, you make all the excuses for all the mistakes he made. But if he's not, you know, then you know you have no nothing for him. You know, no excuses, no nothing. Whatever he does wrong, once he does something wrong, you know, he's gonna have to live with that mistake for the rest of his life." They said, like you don't forgive him for anything if he doesn't look good, you know. He said, لَقَدْ ضَلَّ مَنْ تَحْوِي هَوَاهُ خَرِيدَةً وَقَدْ ضَلَّ مَنْ تَقْضِي عَلَيْهِ كَعَابُ. I explained this poem online, so y'all can go back to the explanation. Actually, this is the only poem I explained it on my channel. And maybe I think it was like 11 or something lessons. You can go back and go to the explanation. But this yeah, he just yeah, man, that's a good poem. What does it say?
So I got lost.
Yeah.
أما الجميل عندكن ثواب ولا
مسيء
لمسيء عندكن
متاب.
متاب لقد ضل من تحوي هواه
خريدة
خريضة وقد ذل من تقضي عليه
كعاب
كعاب
ولكنني والحمد لله حازم أعز إلى ذلت لهن رقاب. See, and that's what he said. He said, but me, he said, I maintain my honor while they bow to these women. You know, while they bend their necks trying to please these women. He said, I maintain my honor. You know, I don't give myself up to that type of behavior. Beautiful poem, beautiful poem. The women hate that. Every time I used to read that poem, your mother would get angry. Your mother hated that poem with a passion. Yeah, boy. Women hate that poem, especially if they understand it. You know, but wallah, it's a beautiful poem. And he's the one that said in the poem, "Ani nahnu fi zamanin tahakkamu fi asadihina kilabu," that we live in a time where, you know, dogs are ruling over the lions. You know, and subhanallah, like that's a beautiful. That's probably that poem, like for the last 25 years. That has been my favorite poem. Every country that I've lived in, I had to buy the Diwan Abi Faras just for that poem. Just for that poem. If you get to A.J. Arbery, he did a translation of different poetry.
He did a translation of the Quran too.
Yeah, I don't know about that one though, but I'll go with his poetry. He did a translation. You can find it on Amazon. He did a translation of the poetry of Al-Mutanabbi, and he also did just like random. It's called the Arabic Student Primer or something like that. You can find it on Amazon. So I actually had a printed copy of this in Damaj. And that's where I got this poem from, because he translated the poem of Abu Firas, and that's where I read it. I read it and then I wrote it out, and then that's where I had it. So it's a beautiful book. What A.J. Arbery did, and I went back and I went through the translations, and mashallah, he did a very good job at translating those. I haven't much gone through the one on Mutanabbi. I have it, but I need to sit down and go through it. But he did a very good job. He has the Abu Tamam. He did the translation of the Abu Tamam one from about the Romans. And I remember when I had that book, and the brother Yaqub, he saw that I had the book and it had that poem, Abu Tamam's poem in it. He said, "Let me hold the book." He took the book and he wrote out the poem and he memorized it. He gave it back to me like, I don't know, a couple weeks later. I was like, "You finished it?" I said, "I finished it. I got it now." You know, because he was searching for that poem, and it was in that book. And as soon as he saw it in the book, he took the book. He said, "I'll give it back to you when I'm finished." You know, just to write that poem out. And so it's a very good book. And his translations they're on point. MashaAllah, he did a good job. But it's in real old English. So if you're not for like, you know, you guys, you younger generation, you're gonna have a hard time reading that book. You're like, "What is he talking about? I don't know these English terminologies, man." But yeah, it's a good book. All right, so inshallah, we're going to stop here. ويلا هنا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.